computer. It's not one I've downloaded or paid for. It's just one that came with my computer. Almost 100% of the time when you have a laptop, you have some sort of editing software. So when you open up a picture on the computer, it opens up into Preview or Microsoft Photo Editor or something like that. And you'll have basic tools like you see here, like exposure or contrast or highlights or shadows, and you're able to edit and crop your picture. So we're going to just start there. When we talk about editing, the first thing that you want to be able to do before you even edit your picture, because I want you to get into the habit of going in and editing your pictures and seeing if you can improve them in any way. But the first thing you have to have is you have to start with a high quality photo. So you want to make sure that your photo isn't blurry, that you have solid lighting, that you didn't take it inside with fluorescent lighting, or it was dark and your camera didn't capture enough information. You want to make sure that the photo is well thought out, that it's not cluttered with other information that you can't easily crop out. For example, tons of cars in the background, or lots of clothes or mess, or things on the counter, just things that are distracting. So you want to make sure that, obviously it's totally fine if it's in your picture, if you can crop it out, but if you can't, then you might want to think about retaking that picture, or when you're taking your photographs, to just move to the other side or move to a different angle. Maybe the light was too far behind him and there wasn't enough light on the face and it didn't light it up, or your object was too dark and your flash kept wanting to turn on, and so you needed to move that object over to a window that had natural lighting. I want you to think about those types of things. So first of all, have a high quality photo. Make sure you thought it out. That once you have that, then you want to upload your photos to your computer. So you can, if it's on your phone, you email them to yourself, or you get your USB cord or your SD card and you put it in your computer and you open them up. So I have lots of pictures of my kids, and so I'm going to show you some examples. This photo was taken a few years ago with my Canon SLR camera. It's not super fancy or super new, but it's one that gives me options for manual and things like that. But this one I shot using the automatic setting. It wasn't anything super fancy. But a couple of things that I really like about this picture is this photo is taken outside, so it has good lighting. It was taken in the morning before the sun came up. It was too bright, but it's good enough that you have, and it's also backlit, which means his face is in shadow, but it's still clear because there was enough information, and the focus, my camera focused on his face. It didn't focus on the background, for example. And you can tell that because it has a shallow depth of field. It has an aperture value that makes it so he is in focus and the background is blurred. That you'll figure out more of when you get later on into class if you don't know what that is already. So, but what I like about it is that because the background's blurry, it really puts the focus on his face. So, but there's a couple things that I could do here. This photo, the first thing that I probably want to think about when I bring a photo in is, can I crop this to make this more interesting? I like this photo because he's not completely in the center. When you put someone or an object completely in the center of your photo, it's boring. It just makes it stagnant. It's not as interesting. It kind of feels like just a product. It's not as interesting. In this photo, I'm not showing his entire figure, so I'm not trying to tell you everything. I've cropped it already, so he is cut off right above his knees. I always tell people you don't want to ever crop someone or cut them off right at their feet or right at their hands or right at their neck. It's just really uncomfortable. So you want to make sure that if you do show someone, you're only showing part, that you cut them off at a place that's comfortable. For example, at the shoulders, in between the arms, right above the belly, right above the knee. You can even crop part of his face out if you wanted to make this more interesting. But you want to make sure that you make it comfortable. Secondly, when you're cropping things, you don't want to put someone's feet or someone's top of their head too close to the top. You can crop it. So for example, this would be the top, but you don't want to leave it so it's like right there. And I'll show you what that looks like. If I crop that, he feels so squished in that frame. There's not enough room for him to breathe, right? So it's just not comfortable. So that's one thing that you can think of when you are cropping photos. But I do kind of want to crop out this. This is kind of distracting to me. So I might take and crop this, and I can crop it a little bit off that side and a little bit off that, and maybe a little bit off the top to make these leading lines kind of lead into his face, and I can crop it there. So he's still not centered. He has there's a clear background that's still really interesting, but it's not distracting. If I really had thought about this photo, I might not have had him wear that shirt, but that's okay. Still a good photo. It's clear, it has good lighting, and it's not cluttered. So now I want to look at these types of things. Exposure. That's how long your camera lens stays open. So if it's not open, it goes really dark. If it's open longer, it's really bright. So you kind of want to stay with a happy medium. I wouldn't necessarily mess with the exposure on this one too much. I would probably keep it the same. Your contrast is the level of intensity between your darks and lights. So if I were to lower the contrast, it's going to blur and get gray. It makes the image softer. Okay, so for this image, it doesn't work to lower the contrast at all. And for most images, I always bump up the contrast a little bit. It just makes it a little more interesting. See how those darks start to pop? If you go too high contrast, all of your details will blur together. Okay, so you just want to heighten it a little bit. This one has highlights and shadows. Sometimes you'll have one that says mid-tone contrast, and those are your highlights are your lights. Your shadows are your darks. Your highlights, if you bump it up, it's going to lighten your lights. And your shadows, it's going to lighten your shadows. So his face is really dark because he's been backlit. I might want to bump up the shadows on that. If I go too far, it's going to take away a lot of that really nice detail, because you want to have some darks and lights and midtones. If it's all too light, if it's all too dark, then it's just not interesting, okay? So I might bump this up a little bit so you can see a little bit more of his face, and then go back and bump up some more of the contrast just to bring some of those back in. And then if I wanted to, I could make these highlights darker. See how it softens those highlights in his hair. They're not as intense, but I really like those. I don't think I really want to mess with that a lot, okay? Because I like that it's white and black, okay? Now, saturation is your color, and it's going to change all of the colors. Sometimes you'll see one that says, you'll have one that will do color by color, but this one is going to do all the colors at the same time. So saturation, if I desaturate it, it will turn black and white, okay? I can soften it so it's not as bright. If I bump it up, he's going to turn really orange, and this is going to be really green, which is cool, but maybe too much because of that red of his shirt. So it kind of distracts. So I would just bump up the saturation just a little bit to make it all kind of come together. You have your temperature. If I wanted it more cool, which means more blue, I would go this way. If I want it to be more warm or reds and yellows, I would go this way. I like both of them. I think they're both interesting, but I kind of want to keep this kind of natural. So I'm going to stay and just make it a little bit warmer. Because it was a warm day, it kind of goes with it. You might go with a cooler temperature picture if you have lots of blues and purples, and warmer if you have lots of reds and yellows and greens. Tint has to do with green and purple. Usually I don't mess with this just because it's not something that you need to do, especially for people. It just makes them feel unnatural. So I wouldn't mess with that at all. And then sharpness, if it was a little bit blurry, you can sharpen it. Or if you go down, it's just going to make it really soft. In this picture, I'm not going to mess with that either. So those are basic editing tools. All right. Those are things that you need to understand and look at. First of all, I want you to look at cropping. Can I make this more interesting? Can I crop anything out that doesn't make sense? Is my picture interesting? Am I showing too much information or not enough? So think about those types of things. And I wanted to show you a couple other things about lighting. I took all of these pictures with the same exact camera, okay? So These two pictures were taken on the same day. This picture was taken outside when it was a little bit overcast, so there's not a bunch of harsh shadows, which I think shadows are interesting. It just really depends on the type of picture you're taking. But for this one, it worked out well. It has great saturation, like nice intensity of color. His white shirt stands out against the red background. Okay. In this picture, I took this picture inside. Obviously, it's a funny little snapshot, but I took it inside. The light is behind him and it's really intense, and it's made his face feel grainy. This is not a picture I would necessarily want to use to then edit because it's grainy. I could, for example, sharpen it and change it a little bit. But it's never going to get much better than it is because it's grainy. I could have turned the other way and put my back to the light and had him turn to face me. And that, it might have still been too bright, but I would have had more light to work with and my camera would have worked a little bit better. So I want you to really think about that. Like where is a good photo? You know, what makes a good photo? Same thing with this. This is taken outside. The lighting's really harsh. But it has these really cool shadows. And again, I could crop this. I maybe would want to just crop this. I'm going to make this smaller for you and tell you what I mean. I might want to crop this and make it so you focus more on him. I like this wooden post because it kind of frames it in. But like that post in the background is kind of irritating. It doesn't really add to the picture, right? And if I want to focus more in on his face, I can crop it here. And then it brings you right in to what's going on. And again, like I could up those shadows, but like I said, you can see a lot of that information and those things are interesting. I might even want to make it more intense, depending on the type of picture, and change around some of these levels to make it feel more bright, more sunny. I might want to maybe just take some of the harshness away of those, sorry, I grabbed the shadows, the highlights, just to make it not as bright. Again, eventually you're going to develop a style, something you like. Maybe you like really, really bright pictures. Maybe you like more muted pictures. Maybe you like your pictures to be soft. Maybe you like them to be really intense. Those are things that I want you to think about when you start telling a story with your photos. But remember that you have to start with a good quality photo. Make sure that it's clear. Make sure it's not cluttered or it can be edited. Make sure that you have solid lighting. And if you stick within those 3 things, you're 9 times out of 10, you're going to succeed. So I hope that this helps. I hope it gives you a little more confidence. And thank you. Let me know if you need anything.